Welcome to a new episode of The Career Changers. Today, our guest is Femi Opaneye, founder of Fortune, business advisor, mentor, and growth strategist. In 2009, he found himself at a major crossroads in his career after losing his job during the financial crisis. After taking a long, hard look at what he truly wanted out of life and work, he transitioned from investment banking and law to entrepreneurship. Today, we will discuss his career journey, going from corporate challenges to entrepreneurial pursuits, and how to find inspiration through introspection and self discovery. Hi, Femi. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hi there. Thank you for having me.
So let's start with your background and your career. First of all, the question we ask to all of our guests, what was your dream job when you were a child?
I have no idea. Maybe a secret agent like James Bond.
Oh, interesting. Did you do anything related to that at all?
Absolutely not.
No. What did you decide to study? What is your educational background?
My father's a doctor, but in the end, I decided to become a lawyer. I was not good at science at all. I hated it. And so I studied law, and then I went to law school here in London.
And how did you start your professional life, or better, what was your first job?
My first job, it was working for the Law Society. If anyone is a lawyer, they will know exactly what the Law Society is. And I was working for the Intervention Archives Department in the Law Society.
Mm. And then how did you progress your career from that?
Yes, after that, I believe I became a paralegal within a law firm. Again, very admin and paper driven, but that was the first start of my legal pursuits.
So we mentioned in your story that at some point in your career there was a financial crisis in 2008, 2009, and that was the moment where you felt impacted personally and professionally. What happened at that time?
Yes, actually, the financial crisis was very interesting because I was studying the markets. At the time, I was working for Deutsche Bank, and I was in the law department, and I kept asking my boss if I was going to lose my job. But I think I must have asked him that for about a month, and he kept saying, "No, you're crazy. That will never happen." And eventually, he is the same person who fired me, so I
That,
got fired.
that must have been quite painful at the time.
Yes, it was. It was very painful. I actually became suicidal at that point, and that was part of the transition.
Oh, and so I guess that was your turning point, and then you felt very low psychologically. Did you get any
Yeah.
support? Did you have anyone supporting you? And how did you decide to pursue then a different path in your career?
I did have people to support me. I just didn't lean into that support. I've always been very introspective, and it was the introspection that got me out of that crisis.
Mm. And I guess at the time you had more time to dedicate to yourself and actually look at what you really wanted. Were there specific practices or moments that help you to gain clarity at the time?
At the time, there weren't any specific practices. I just decided at some point, because this happened over a 2 week period when I was feeling very low. I was desperately trying to get back into banking. And it seemed like an impossibility at the time. Actually, it was because there were no jobs.
Mm.
And so I just decided to get the next available job, any job, which I did. I was selling home insulation. I was absolutely dreadful at it. I guess the introspective part, which I've looked at later on in life, is that I was at the pinnacle of my career in the legal and banking field. And within the space of a couple of months, I fell to the lowest point in my job or career path. And I wanted to really understand why that was and what I could do about it. Because actually, even though I was at the highest point, I hated it. And so I thought, why do I hate it so much? If I do hate it, why am I still doing it? And how could something that I hate lead me towards suicide, right? It didn't make any sense for me. And so, like I said, I got any job, it got me out of the house. And once I was able to get out of the house, I stopped thinking in those kind of terms and decided I was going to take my path in a different direction.
And I guess your previous career was probably part of your identity. You say it was the peak of my career. So
Mhm.
sometimes our jobs, I think probably more often than not, they become part of who we are and how we present ourselves to others, or how we perceive ourselves. Was was that difficult, that shift in going from one day where you felt at the top of your game to
Mhm.
the next day where you didn't know who you were?
Yeah, it was how my friends identified me, how my family identified me, and it was a sense of pride and prestige, even though I hated it,
Yeah.
and so it was a blessing in disguise. Let's put it that way.
Mm. How did you move on from that? When did you have the first insights that there was something else that you wanted to do and you were ready to take the first step forward?
It still took me another 5 years to get out of that world. But I think the first step was my father asked me a question. He asked me what I wanted, right? He said, "What do you want?" And that was the first step to the question that made me start to think. And at that point, I started writing. So I wrote a blog, and actually, that blog is still available on the internet. And I started writing a lot. I actually made this blog available to my friends and family. And the comment that I got back from them was that it was very depressing.
No. What were you writing about?
My first blog the title was "What Do You Want?" And
Mm.
so I started writing a lot of just about my life and what I was doing and how I felt. And I would advise people, if they were to do it, to keep it private. But I made my mine available to all of my friends and family so they could read it.
Mm. And I
Yeah.
guess writing is usually suggested as a tool of self-discovery because you can enter into the flow and express your feelings. It actually works generally, so it's a good tool. So
Yeah.
do you have nowadays any practice related to introspection and self-discovery, even if now you have overcome that phase, and then we can talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. These days, I still write a lot. I create lists. Other introspective practices I do are just sitting down, closing my eyes, thinking about what I typically want. Meditation as well. I I engage in a lot of different practices in order to figure out what I truly want, because I believe that's where the source of my unhappiness and most unhappiness comes from. Is we spend most of our lives doing what other people want rather than what we want.
Exactly. And I also think that between the time 2008, 2009 and today, a lot of things have changed in terms of how much we talk about well-being and practice that can help us to improve the quality of our life, being at work. How do you maintain a balance between introspection and action in your business ventures? Because I guess we can sit all day looking at ourselves, but the outside world still requires us to take action, and you have set up your own business and been successful with that. So how do you maintain the right balance?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So the way I see it, I look at it as a masculine energy on one side and then feminine energy on the other side.
That's
Now, in
interesting.
society, we always see the masculine energy, right? And the feminine energy, as I see it, is equally important, right? And that is to balance both out. It is things like meditation, it is sitting down, it is contemplating, it is closing one's eyes, thinking about the next step. It is practices like tapping, journaling, all of these things, deep focus, all of these things are very important. And I prone to doing more of the masculine. But when things are not going as well, I realize that there's an imbalance. And then I will stop and then I'll focus on more on my feminine energy. And this is the way that I believe is very important, because if you don't, I think if you focus more on your action, you can get to a place that you become depressed, your blood pressure goes up, and in the end, it becomes actually a negative because you start going backwards.
Yeah, that's very true. And in your social circle, are you able to discuss these topics, or this is something that you just live by yourself?
Oh no, absolutely. I think I'm very unique in that sense. Like I said, when I started writing the blog and I made it available to everyone, they I think that was the first time that I really started talking about what is going on in my own mind and not being ashamed of it. And since then, I do a lot of research into different topics about spirituality and the meaning of life, what we're doing here, where did we come from, where are we going. So I talk a lot about these subjects with my friends, with my family. So I really don't mind. I find it very fascinating to answer these existential life questions.
It creates real connections between people. When we talk about human being and our personal satisfaction, I guess we need to connect to each other. Each of us can always have some negative thoughts or doubt. How do you handle those negative thoughts or doubt during your moments of introspection?
I think it's very important to have a therapist. That's something that later in my journey of entrepreneurship I got into. And the reason I mention a therapist is that a therapist is actually trained to listen, right? They're trained to listen to you. You can speak to your friends and family, but they are not, we are never trained to listen. We are trained to speak, but we are never trained to listen. And so, therefore, when someone is speaking, you are waiting for them to stop so that you can give their opinion. Whereas a therapist is actually trained to listen to you. And as far as, so that starts that moment of introspection internally. I still do a lot of writing, I still do a lot of meditation, and I still think about the things that I really want. Because I think if there's some negativity that is niggling, it is still a reflection that we are working on someone else's plan or someone else's idea rather than what we truly want for ourselves.
Mm. Yeah, it's so true about having someone that can listen to us.
Yeah.
And I like when you say that we are not trained to listen to other people. And definitely a skill and something that people that go in therapy or maybe they look at this journey of introspection, they learn and would be maybe a subject that should be taught in school.
Absolutely, absolutely. It definitely should.
So nowadays in your career, how are things different compared to when you were in brackets at the top of your game in the financial industry, but you had now a journey of introspection? Do you feel that today you're more resilient, that you can adapt more to the circumstances?
Phew, absolutely. I would say that as an entrepreneur, it's very different from life in the working world because I spend a good deal of time on my own. I have to come up with concepts, with ideas, and I have to really focus on my mental well-being, my physical well-being, because if I didn't, then I think I would definitely have that negative impact of negative thoughts and that belief that I cannot achieve what I set out to achieve. Introspection, writing, taking time out for myself, working out, doing things like yoga and qigong. These are all practices that I incorporate. And that is, again, part of the feminine energy that I talked about.
Mm. And so we have covered this before, but today, what is actually your mission? What is your job? What is your career?
Today, I run a company called Fortune, which it's a hybrid consulting firm. And essentially, what we do is when we start working with clients, we look at the gaps in their business and we help them with their growth. So SEO, so search engine optimization, as well as email marketing. And we look to expand their business.
Mm. And
Mhm.
so, based on your experience, what key pieces of advice would you give to aspiring entrepreneurs who are just starting out?
I would start by saying find an idea that works for you, that resonates with you, build an MVP, which is a minimal viable product, and take it into the market, go and find your first buyer, make a
Mm.
sale, and then speak to your buyer. Do you like this? What do you not like about it? And that's the best way to start entrepreneurship.
And what would you do after that?
After that, continue to sell, continue to make more sales, improve your product or your service. So the one that you sold was version 1. You're looking to create a version 2, and you're looking to expand your sales. Maybe take on your first employee. So start to hire and maybe build a website, because I didn't mention a website before. I just talked, and that was deliberate, right? Focus on creating your product and selling, right? And then start to figure out other aspects of your business.
Like you sum it up very well in a few words. So you went through your inner journey in terms of introspection and reaching this new place in your life and your career. But also, how important has been, if it has been, mentorship in your journey to become an entrepreneur? And how can someone find a good mentor?
Yes, absolutely. There is a website that I recently discovered. It is called the Mentoring Club. And you can go on there and you can find a mentor for free, again, which is great. So I would definitely recommend people to go there. And there are a lot of people that sign up, so it's voluntary. So you can find a great mentor on that particular website. Mentorship is very important. I think it's important that you find the right mentor. That part is very important. You'll come across all kinds of mentors. I have come across all kinds of mentors, but they were never the best mentors. You can find some really terrible ones that will actually have a negative impact on your journey. So you really need to be careful and continue to question yourself and question them. Is this the right person for me? And then also, as you progress, your mentor will change, right? Sometimes you need a mentor for your mentality. Sometimes it's for your physical well-being. Sometimes it's for your career. Sometimes it's for different aspects. So those are the things that need to be kept in mind.
Yeah, and definitely agree with the fact that someone can have a negative effect on you, especially if they're not aligned with your way of thinking, or maybe you have a vision that they cannot see. Uh,
That's right.
so it's really important in that case to continue to believe in our ideas or what we see and find the right people that can support us.
Yeah.
We're reaching the end of this episode. Time is going really fast, but we still have a few more questions. First of all, what advice would you give to someone struggling to find clarity and inspiration through introspection? Maybe because they've never done it before.
Yeah, I would make a list, but you are making a list that you're not going to share with anyone else. So it is just what is inside of you, and that is it.
Mm. And what advice would you give to anyone who is looking to change their careers?
Again, forget what your friends and your families think. Go back to that list and make a list of what's important to you in life. And don't focus on what they want, focus on what you want.
So really now, the last question, if you could give yourself a piece of advice, what would you say to your younger self?
Just what we mentioned before, it is no slight on a parent. I would say the majority of parents, they want what's best for their child, right? But what the child wants and what the parents wants are two completely different things. Sometimes the child thinks that the parent wants something, but they don't. I think as we get older, it's not just the parent, it is society as well. Everyone plays a part in this life of shaping people's journey. My advice is find what really resonates with you. And that's why I talk about creating this list that you're not going to show to anyone at all. You create a list or you write about the stuff that really is important to you. It could be anything, absolutely anything. Just keep writing. And then eventually you will start to see things start to emerge. Close your eyes, think about it, write, and eventually what you really want will emerge. And yeah, just focus on that path and let everyone else fall in line.
Well, thank you, Femi, so much for sharing your insights and experiences with us today. And for our listeners, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tune in next week for a new inspirational episode of The Career Changers. Thank you, Femi.
Thank you for having me.